Hello everyone, Sandra here with more Let's Make a Game Astral Collision. And history takes a lot of time to work on, as it turns out. Most of what I've been doing has been over here in this lovely document. You'll notice there are some colors over here. That's because I did some conditional formatting to help color code to keep track of duplicate names. But I have finished naming all of the rulers of Kendra, which took a while. We get all the way up to a Lindra. What is this? 17th. So lots of them. Our current king is King Bohemsa II, because Sirac III was a history buff, and the previous Bohemsa was all the way back here in 1835, which I have not even gotten up to on this. So the big thing that I've been working on has been this blurb section over here, which has just information on every single ruler of Kendra. Not necessarily like a lot, but it's just a little like snippet of like who, like what was the relationship in the ruling family, because we have some stuff of like this person right here was the nephew of the previous ruler, for example. And things like that. So there's a lot of stuff here. We'll go over that in a moment. A couple of things to talk about. It's also super unfortunately covered by my face. Well, I'm sure I can just scroll over and solve that problem a little bit. Okay, so like I'll read each of these out loud shortly, but first, a couple of things of note over here in the map. So I had to kind of go back as I was going through the process. I'll talk about some of this in a moment. But I noticed that there was a couple more towns that had monuments. And remember, a monument like this indicates that it existed before Sir Lionel was born, so I had to make sure of that. Notably, Sycamore has one. Sandy March has one. Isle Watch does not have a monument. Altus does not have a monument. Portress does not have a monument anywhere. Is not going, like, they're not going to have a monument either. Lionelholm and Tellendil have monuments. This was originally Taurus, for those who may not remember. I've talked about it a couple of times. And turns out Easton also had a monument. This was originally called Weston. So if you're like, what's up with this? I will explain it. So we go back to the world map. This right here is Weston, or Easton now, as it's called. And this is Traveler Rest. It's the eastern town here. But Easton, so this was originally Weston. And I realized, you know what, that sounds a lot like West Inn. And you know what? My reasoning for its founding can clearly be that it was a way station between Kendra and Taurus. Cool. Except it's east of both of those. So why would it be called West Inn if it's east? I guess it's getting renamed Easton now. Traveler Rest right here. This town, still very much so a work in progress. I've gotten some of the bare bones with it. It's on the coast, and it's got some mountains to the sides. So if we go look at the world map, you can see it's nestled into a mountain here to the north and west of the left half. And to the east and north, it's ocean. And so that's reflected in how I'm setting stuff up. So there's a bit of a bay right here. And there's ocean. This is still very much so work in progress. Mountain stuff off to the side here and here. Just some guidelines for me knowing what's going on too. This is called Traveler Rest because this is a town that would have been settled by travelers who are ex-adventurers. This is kind of like where they hang out. It's the retirement home for adventurers, I guess you could say. Still very much so, like I said, a work in progress. But I mentioned some of those things because they're relevant stuff that's been going on. So if we go back to here, before I start reading these, just a bit of a word about the process. This is actually a lot more difficult to do than I would have thought. The reason why is because you just have to make a ton of decisions, and decision making is mentally taxing. There's a lot of micro creativity here. There's a lot of small decisions. For example, what is the relationship between this ruler and the previous one, which there's some important things here, like the length of reign is actually a really significant figure. Like, this 51, 60 years, 67 years, like, these are really long reigns. How is somebody having a reign that long? What's going on that's causing that to be the case? So there's stuff like that that I often will be trying to think about, of like, okay, what justifies this this reign duration? What makes sense of that? Other things too, like what sort of impact did they have on the world? How were they as a ruler? What was the relationship with the previous ruler? Like, some of that's pretty straightforward. Like, most of the time I just go with the default of they were the offspring of the previous ruler, but not always, because sometimes that doesn't make as much sense, or sometimes it feels like there should be something more complicated going on. So there's just a lot of different things where you have to make a lot of creative decisions with this, and that unfortunately just means that it's very mentally taxing, so it's gone a lot more slowly than I would have liked, but just because of all of those little decisions, those little bits of creativity. But let's just go through it. So, year 0, a reign of 127 years, is King Kendra, the first leader of his people, but he was only made a king after his death. The world was, in time, named after him. So, pretty straightforward. Kingship wasn't really a concept at that point. They were too small, so he's more of a chieftain. King Bohemus, the son of Kendra, who became chieftain in his place. He was crowned king in the year the walls of Kendara were completed. So I don't have the timeline up right now. I'm not going to grab it, but the walls of Kendara were made during his time, and also, like, these guys already had information on stuff that they did in the timeline tool. I'm filling in a lot more details of stuff that happened during other people's reigns just because I need that information. But I just mentioned that. Queen Classis, the daughter of Bohemus, Taurus was founded under her reign. After its founding, she worked tirelessly to firmly establish courier services between Taurus and Kendara. King Kendis I, a firm ruler, son of Classis, who loved order. He established the first guilds for farming, pottery, smithing, usually found metal ores, herbalism, and textiles. To explain what I mean by farmed metal, using found metal ores for smithing, okay, you can see that. Most metal ores that we work with are, at this point in time, stuff that we have to mine. But it is possible to find just ore lying around on the ground if there hasn't been a lot of harvesting of that. Now, that traditionally gets used up pretty quickly because it's very convenient to get access to, but that's how smithing would have worked at first here. Is they wouldn't have been mining, they would have in fact just been using ore that they just found lying around on the ground. An easy way to potentially find copper, maybe they had iron ore around, that sort of stuff, and they would have been able to get to it. Smithing was a known practice. Metallurgy was a known practice from the before times, before the Astral sundering. Things like pottery were as well, and stuff like that. So just a note on that. King Andris I, the son of Kendis, born to him in his old age, because, again, 61-year reign. He became king as all his older brothers perished, along with his father, in an ill-fated attack against a horde of monsters. Andris had been... Let's see if I do this. Yeah. Andris had been deemed not yet ready for the attack, being only a youth. He took many advisors and was known to make no decision without counsel. Let's see if I do that. Okay, cool. The daughter of... so, Queen Kendira I. The daughter of Kendis, she fell ill and perished. She was barren and thus had no direct heir. The guilds deliberated on who should succeed her, for they had grown powerful by this time. So she had only a 14-year reign. I'm trying to figure out, okay, why a 14-year reign? King Osirin I. The nephew of Kendira, Osirin loved history, little of it though there was. It was also he who properly established the royal catacombs in Kendara and moved the tombs of his predecessors there. He also saw to it that a scribes guild was established. They began their work on creating the Kendaran library. King Kendis II, the son of Osirin, Kendis was much like his father. He was much concerned about the stability of the royal line, because Kendira had, there'd been the heir issue during his father's, like leading up to his father, and he was aware of that. So he's concerned about the stability of the royal line, and thus took many wives to ensure that, even if one line failed, yet another may persist. He also, with the input of many, heavily codified the process of succession. So Candace II was really concerned about succession and all that stuff. Queen Ona I, a daughter of Candace and lover of exploration, Ona sent many expeditions of knights out into the world to better understand it. It was on one of these expeditions that the rich ores of what came to be Telendil were found. The fortress city was built soon afterwards. So Telendil was built during her reign and discovered by some of the expeditions she sent. King Konar I, a son of Ona and one of her few surviving children, for many perished at the head of ill-fated expeditions. So Ona had a lot of offspring that did not survive. They led expeditions and didn't go well. Konar was a cautious ruler who thought it more important to build up the strength of Kendara, Taurus, and Telendil, rather than exploring. He cared little for exploration, deeming it overly dangerous, due to all of his fallen siblings. King Konar II. So we had a 56-year reign followed by a 68-year reign. The last-born son of his father, Konar I, Konar II became king young when most of his family perished in a massive attack on Kendara by the monsters, who had been left alone outside the walls of the city. Remember, Konar was just focused on building up the strength of, internal stuff. Well, it turns out it didn't build it up well enough, and the monsters kind of overwhelmed him. He established the practice, Konar II here did, of sending regular squads of royal knights out into the world to keep the monster populations in check, at least near the cities. Telendil was particularly difficult to maintain, however. So yeah, just kind of the idea of okay, Konar is building up the strength of Kendara, Taurus, and Telendil, not exploring out. But because he's not sending knights out, the monster hordes are able to build and actually overwhelm their expectations of what their defenses needed to be. Queen Calcis I. So this is a sort of, probably was supposed to be named after Queen Classis, but they kind of got the name wrong. The daughter of Konar II, Calcis was a steady and stable ruler, well liked by the people of Kendra. Pretty simple. King Bomar, the son of Calcis I, Bomar loved the sea. Sandy March was founded during his reign, and he often held court there in a palace intricately carved of wood. There's a number of references to things being made of wood rather than of stone, because stone has endured, right? It endures longer. We're looking at stuff that decayed, and so Sandy Marsh has no remnants of Bomar's palace because it was made of wood and is subsequently vanished over the years. And there's a number of references to wooden walls and things like that as a result to just kind of support that of oh, these places don't have walls now, but they had walls then. The walls were made of wood, though. That's why they're not here now. Why they were made of stone is a little bit hand-wavy. But anyway, that's kind of what's going on with some of that, just so people understand the thinking. A 60-year reign by Queen Kendra II. The daughter of Bomar, Kendra was made queen when she challenged the worthiness of her older siblings, who were given to feasting, drunkenness, and carousing. She won the challenge and became queen. She also loved the sea, as her father did. Her older siblings mostly stayed in Kendara, while she learned from her father in Sandy March. She was a fierce ruler who took the responsibilities of the throne seriously. So basically, her older siblings lived in Kendara and they were basically given to partying. Hardcore partying, and she's like, none of these people are worthy to be ruler after my father, so she's like, I'm going to be ruler, and made the case successfully, and was able to claim that. King Okendris I, 67-year reign. The nephew of Kendra II, son of her younger brother. Kendra II herself proved to be a poor mother, as she was oft given to ruling. In other words, she spent more time ruling than parenting. In an act authorized by Candace II's rules of succession, she officially appointed her more qualified nephew, her heir, over her own children. He spent the first part of his reign placating his cousins. His first wife died in childbirth, and the child was lost with her. He refused to marry again for many years and gave himself over to his work. However, he eventually married again and had a daughter, who he doted upon. And that was Queen Calcis II, the daughter of Okendris. Calcis II was given to self-absorption. She is spoiled by her father, after all. She wasn't cruel, but rather she was poor at considering the needs of others. Still, she was known as being responsive when those needs were shown to her, and she was known for having a reactive sort of sympathy. It was during her reign that Callan attempted to engage in banditry, but she forgave him, and Callan was officially born. So this is an important little thing that I want to include as just a detail in the world. Banditry doesn't really work in Kendra. Nobody's going to accept your coin because they're you stole it. And then trying to maintain an outpost is actually a lot of work. So what happens here is Callan is a former royal knight who persuaded his squad mates to basically steal a bunch of money because they didn't feel they were being paid enough for their work. So they stole a bunch of money and then found nobody who would trade with them, and that trying to maintain their stolen loot in the woods was extremely difficult and time-consuming, and all of that sort of stuff, because as it turns out, there's monsters everywhere, and the monsters are going to attack you. And so Callandin, or Callan's Den, or the Den of Callan, was founded, and eventually he basically is like, I apologize, and Calcis was like, well, we forgive you, but you need to stay there. And that kind of established a new town, or they chose to stay there. I don't 100% know. I'll kind of figure that out when I write the description for Callandin. But I just really wanted to get this detail in of banditry just really does not work in Kendra, because the monsters make it impossible for bandits to successfully hold an outpost without basically just having to become big enough that they're just a functional town anyway. So, yeah. And then they're having to deal with, trade with the others. Plus, once you get the Adventurers Guild, adventurers, bounties set on bandits would be really effective and all that sort of stuff. And their money would not work with anyone else, so they'd be really isolated on their own, which is a huge detriment. Queen Ona II. The daughter of Calcis, Ona II was similar to her mother in many regards, if a bit more attentive. She notably prized maintenance and upgrades to internal infrastructure, and was responsible for improved developments to the paths between the three cities of Taurus, Kendra, and Telendil, as well as reinforcing the wooden walls of Sandy March and Callandin. The East Inn, later Easton, was founded during this time as a way station between Kendara, Taurus, and Telendil. So that's kind of the origins of that. And yeah, she reinforced the walls. Keep in mind, Callandin has been founded for a while now during her reign. Something else to note is Easton has a very large inn. So that's cool detail. Part of it is co-opted to be an Adventurers Guild house now, but King Onarka. 6-year reign. The son of Ona, Onarka was not well loved. He was known for being full of himself and died young. He insisted on joining the royal knights on patrols, and one ended poorly. It took nearly a month for full word to get back to Kendara that he had fallen. King Bohim I. Only a 12-year reign. The son of Ona and brother to Onarka. So, in other words, Onarka died and his brother became king. Bohim was absorbed with the slaying of many monsters, seeking revenge for his brother, whom he had loved and admired since the both were but boys. While not as outright reckless as his brother, he nevertheless also fell in battle against the monsters. And then we have Bohim II, with a 62-year reign. The son of Bohim I, and a more level-headed ruler, learning from his father and uncle to pay the monsters more respect. Nevertheless, he found it worthwhile to exercise a strong hand against the monsters. He made the roads between the settlements more paved, established outposts and way stations along them, and invested heavily in the smithing guild, which rose to great prominence during his reign, as he ordered many arms and armaments for his soldiers. He was beloved for the strength of his hand, basically for the strength of his hand, and despised for the high taxes that fueled that strength. So basically, the people loved how strong he was against the monsters and how safe he kept everything, but they didn't like paying for it. 14 years reign for Queen Janara. The daughter of Bohim II, Janara had a particular inclination towards justice and judgment, so much so that she was known as Janara the Just. Additionally, Sycamore was founded during her days, as the various populations had grown enough that more farming was necessary to feed everyone. She had a short reign just because her father had a long one. That's kind of how that works. Queen Lystra I, 39-year reign. The daughter of Janara, Lystra I lived an exceptionally long time. Ironhill's mines were discovered during her days, and she made sure to secure them, though more in the manner of Caledon, with wooden walls, than in the manner of Telendil, which had stone walls, as the threat of monsters was much lower in Iron Hill's location. Also, the efforts of the royal knights in controlling the monster population were proving to be effective, at least in guarding population centers. King Ulfons I, the son of Lystra I, Ulfons I was known for his diligence to his tasks as king. However, he had a soft spot for his family, and was known for spoiling his children in particular. He was notably fascinated by magic, and, more than previous rulers, encouraged its study. Then the 8-year reign of Queen Lystra II. The daughter of Ulfons II. This should be Ulfons I. This is why we read things when we discover typos. The daughter of Ulfons I, Lystra had a keen mind for governance, particularly when it came to deploying the royal knights to head off problems. However, she also loved jewelry, sculpture, artwork, and fine food. This greatly enriched certain guilds and depleted the royal treasury. It should be noted that Lionel was born towards the end of her reign, and that she did send scholars to investigate the appearance of the monuments, but other than transcribing them, they could determine little about them. A 52-year reign of King Ulfons II, the nephew of Ulfons I and cousin to Lystra II. Keep in mind, she had a very short reign. Ulfons II had been given oversight of the royal treasury. He successfully challenged his cousin's claims to the throne based on the serious economic depletion that had occurred. Basically, she spent all the royal coffer's money on art, and he's like, yo, I should be, and he's like in charge of the treasury, so he's like, this is not good, and basically is like, hey, I'm going to depose my cousin. The rules of succession allow for this. But he successfully challenged his cousin's claim to the throne based on the serious economic depletion that had occurred. He oversaw a very austere economic policy, meant to replenish the royal coffers. His detractors called him the usurper for the manner of his displacement of Lystra II. For her part, she graciously continued to oversee the royal knights, where she had been especially skillful, and actually aided Sir Lionel in the founding of the Adventurers Guild, though she passed not long afterwards. Ulfons II saw the fall of Telendil, as he saw it no longer financially viable to support. Sycamore and Easton also fell during his reign. Again, he's like super holding back on funds and like depleted the knights and stuff like that. He saw the rise of the Adventurers Guild and applauded it, seeing it as yet another way to mitigate costs to the crown. So, part of what's going on here is we have some economic realities. Lystra was she spent too much, and that really seriously hampered the royal coffers. Ulfons is like replacing her, trying to spend as little money as possible, which depletes the knights, leads to the fall of Telendil, which leads to Sir Lionel founding the Adventurers Guild. And the Adventurers Guild, he's like, hey, cool, they can take over stuff. Plus, they hired like a bunch of the knights that he had laid off became adventurers. So, yeah. The son of Ulfons II, Ulfons III, continued many of his father's policies. His father had a powerful influence on him. He continued to encourage the growth of the Adventurers Guild in particular, as he, like his father, saw it as a way to outsource costs. He notably began to slowly downsize the Royal Knights in response to this. Many of those knights who were let go went to work for the Adventurers Guild. This pathway from knighthood to adventure became more and more common over the course of his reign. This would probably should be continued. He notably continued to slowly downsize the Royal Knights in response to this. But basically, like, Ulfons II, the Adventurers Guild, is founded during his reign. He's like, cool, they can take over the job of the knights, and I don't have to spend as much money on royal knights, and I'm outsourcing this job. And then Ulfons III is like, I'm going to continue this policy, and so the Adventurers Guild gets really firmly established during this time because of that. King Kendis III, the grandson of Ulfons III, so that's this guy, Kendis III's father had no desire for the throne, preferring to study monster biology, such as it was. He notably worked with the Adventurers Guild in cataloging the various monsters of the land. Kendis, for his part, so this is Kendis III, continued to support the Adventurers Guild, seeing it as an important part of the way life now worked, owing in no small part to the fiscal policies of his predecessors. This should probably be plural. In an impressive joint effort, they worked together to rebuild both Sycamore and Weston. This should say Easton. Easton, which had previously fallen to monsters, as established during Ulfons II's reign. King Osiren II, the son of Kendis III, Osiren II, oversaw the renaming of Taurus to Lionelholm, an official act suggested by the Guildmaster of the Adventurers Guild. He also oversaw the building of the Sir Lionel Academy, which was originally founded to train everyone who was wanting to become an adventurer, for there were many in those days who wanted to become one but lacked the training. He often contended with the other guilds, who felt that the Adventurers Guild was receiving an unfair amount of support from the crown. And then we have King Ulfons IV, the son of Osiren II, who often heard his father's complaints about the guilds, and found them to come true when he became king. He took a hardline stance against them, and enacted policies that decreased the power of all guilds save the Adventurers Guild. After all, by this point, who could imagine living without that guild? And so that's where we've gotten. That is the lore so far. I will just make these, I don't know, yellow to indicate lore so far, and let's just go ahead and add a note too. This is how far the lore went for the previous update video. There we go. Now I have a note, so that way I can know. So that way next time, when I hopefully have more of these done, I do not expect to have all of them done, but more of them, we'll be able to continue where we left off. That's most of what I've been working on. Like I said, these proved to be a lot more challenging to write than I would have expected going into this, but it's good practice, although I'm also thinking about the fact that I have set myself up for 14 worlds worth of world building, and if I'd wanted to come up with a way of giving myself practice at world building, I could scarcely have come up with a better idea. And then 14 disparate worlds that all have their own histories and need all that recorded. And then I have to figure out how they all get along together, or don't, as the case may be. One of the things I do want to do is figure out what stuff I can do when my brain has been fried from coming up with lore, and hopefully I can work on some other things like towns and such, map working and all that sort of stuff. But for now, that's where things are at. That's the development of Kendra. Getting a lot figured out for it, but a lot left to go. And the heady days of the Adventurers Guild rising to greater and greater prominence shall continue. But that's a story for next time, probably. Until then, everyone, thank you all very much for watching. Take care, and goodbye.